Today we're looking at preferred or preferential payment demands from a liquidator. So your business has received a letter from a liquidator saying that in the previous 6 months, one of your clients who has paid money to you is going to be clawing back those payments. So in this case, what should you do? The first thing we recommend is do nothing. The most important thing you do is not to contact the liquidator and to get some advice. The problem with these sort of demands is that certain things you say to the liquidator can confirm that you owe the money back to him. So the first question we're often asked is, but I gave them the goods. I supplied the equipment, I gave whatever service was related to the preferential payment. Unfortunately, this doesn't help you. So what the liquidator is looking for is payments made in the previous 6 months from the company going into liquidation towards you. Now, if there's any assumption that you knew that they had financial difficulties, then these amounts belong to the liquidator, and that's what he's going to be pushing for, regardless of whether you made supply or regardless of whether or not you gave whatever service relates to the payments that were received. But I'm still owed money. Again, the liquidator doesn't care. His whole role is to grab as much money as physically possible for the employees, the secured creditors, and the unsecured creditors of which you're a part. So even if you're still owed money at the time he goes into liquidation, you can still be forced to repay money that you've already received from the company in the previous 6 months. But I accepted reduced payment terms to help them through. This is an admission that you knew they were having financial difficulties, and unfortunately it can actually get you into a lot of trouble where you have clients who have been on account, where you have helped them through, and then you find out that they've gone into liquidation and you're asked to pay the money back. This is something that you need to seriously consider, and if you have had arrangements with your clients on that front, this is going to mean that there are financial consequences for you. So how's it fair? Well, it's not. Liquidators wrote the rules, and quite frankly, they're in their advantage. So for a business which has already had to write off a significant amount of money because their client's gone broke, the second hit is when they turn around and say, well, any payments you received in the previous 6 months, you've got to pay back. And for a lot of businesses, and we've seen this especially in the construction industry, this can be devastating, where you've had to pay your subcontractors or you've had to pay your suppliers, and then you get hit with a preferential claim on top of this. And this can often be the death knell for a lot of small businesses. How about I tell the liquidator to get stuffed? This is something we see a lot, where business owners ring up the liquidator, either become aggressive or make statements such as, I've already accepted reduced payment terms, or I looked after this guy. Those can be admissions that you knew there were financial difficulties, which makes it very hard to prove that you didn't know the company was insolvent. One thing that we do suggest is before talking to the liquidator, you get advice. You don't talk to a liquidator when you receive the letter, and you certainly don't engage with them until you know exactly what your position is. So what are the liquidators actually looking for? So in the final 6 months, they'll look at things like delayed or irregular payments received from the customer. So you might have an arrangement where normally they pay their bill within 7 days, but you push that out to 14 days and they're paying you in round dollar amounts, maybe a $10,000 amount or a $1,000 amount, where before they were paying the bill in full. You've offered them reduced terms. So you've looked at your client, you've said, well, wait a second, we used to give them 28 days to pay, let's drag them into 7. Now a liquidator will be asking why you've actually done this. The worst answer you can give is we had a financial problem with them, or we thought they were in trouble. Because at that point a liquidator is going to say, well, you knew they had financial difficulties, so therefore you've got to pay the money back to me. Now looking at this, we have an example, and this is one of the worst examples we've ever seen. But one of our clients was making a delivery in the morning. As they were driving out, the gates got locked by the liquidator. That time they dropped off $100,000 worth of stock. They didn't have PPSRs in place, so what ended up happening was 3 weeks later we get a letter from the liquidator saying, you knew they were in financial difficulties, we require you to pay back not only all the payments you've received in the last 6 months, but we're also holding on to your stock. So how did this happen? Well, in the first instance our defence was, well, we didn't know they were in financial difficulty because we were delivering on the day you were appointed. The liquidator says, but you should have known they were having financial difficulties. What this means for businesses is sometimes you have no option, you're stuck where you're still supplying someone and you know full well they're in financial difficulties, but you're responsible for payments back to them. What we suggest in situations like this is where clients are starting to have financial difficulties, you reduce their terms or you bring them on to cash on delivery. Now, where they're paying off accounts over a long period of time, this is highly risky for some businesses, and you can actually find that you've put yourself in a position where you're receiving a preferential payment merely by trying to recover your debt. It's important to ensure that you know what the responsibilities and risks are when you start moving into trading terms with your clients. So can I settle with a liquidator? Liquidators are generally very commercial, so if there is a commercial outcome to be had, rather than spending substantial amounts on legal fees, a liquidator will generally settle with you in order to bring to an end a preferential payment claim. So do I have a genuine defence to a preferential payment? Generally what will happen is if you can show that you had no idea of their financial problems, then you have a genuine defence to a preferential payment. Unfortunately, in practical terms, for most businesses, you've accepted delayed payments, or you've allowed them additional trading terms, or you've allowed them to run up an account. These all allow a liquidator to disprove the contention that you didn't know they were having financial difficulties. It can also be that the industry is under pressure, and a liquidator will say, well, you should have known. Proving genuine position towards a preferential payment is quite difficult, and what we suggest is when you see a client who's having financial difficulties, is to move to COD and to drag back your trading terms. If you have any questions about dealing with a preferential payment demand, feel free to give us a call, 1300 023 782.